I feel like I am going mad. Does anyone else feel like that? Hi, my name is Sydney, welcome back to hell. And as per usual, before we launch in, today's video is sponsored by me and my little tea company, Lions Tea Exchange. This makes a great gift for Mother's Day, and we have some great blends that mums would love, like the raspberry elderflower rosé, lemon ginseng, and maybe even the New York breakfast. And as you guys know, we use real tea leaves and these giant pyramid tea bags, which I love. So go check it out if you're interested. I will pop the link in the description box. Now, if you have been here for any length of time, you will probably know that I generally have a very low tolerance for people behaving like animals in any given situation. It does not matter to me which side of the aisle you're on. If you are behaving like a grub person, I do not like it and I do not want to see it. Send yourself to the island and out of my sight.
Why don't you go back to your home on Whore Island?
So of course, it hasn't escaped my attention, and I dare say it hasn't escaped yours either, that over the last number of days and weeks, an astounding amount of people in cities across the United States have been behaving appallingly. It's giving me 2020 Summer of Love vibes. Ugh. If you've been following the news at all, you'll know that many university campuses across the United States have been experiencing student protests in support of Palestine. And so far, these have looked mostly like your normal demonstrations. Scuffles with police, arrests, people acting aggressively and disorderly. Although, and you can call me mean and judgmental for saying this, but I do find it funny how the majority of these people look like they couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. It really reinforces the idea that these kids yearn for manual labor. But now, according to The Guardian, students have set up encampments on more than 80 university campuses in the country and are demanding that their academic institutions sever financial ties with Israel or companies that are connected to the Israeli military's war in Gaza. It is estimated that over 1,000 people, some of whom are suspected to be paid protesters and not actually students, have been arrested since the protests started. And just to be clear here from the outset, there are a lot of really good videos out there floating around that capture precisely what's been going on that I can't include in this video because, unfortunately, YouTube has some really odd rules around protest footage, and I don't want to get age restricted again. Of course, I'm going to include what I can or videos that stood out to me, and hopefully that will satisfy all of you. Hopefully I can still scratch the itch. But anyway, since all of these protests and encampments have been going on, since I've seen a ton of footage relating to incidents, particularly over the last number of days, it's reminded me in detail why I genuinely can't stand the majority of the people involved. The more footage I see, and believe me, there's a lot of footage, the more I'm reminded of the same anger I felt watching people burn their own cities to the ground a couple years earlier. Color me crazy, but you should probably stop doing that. And here's the thing, I fundamentally believe that people have the right to gather, to demonstrate, and to protest. But one of the things that makes me so mad is how these people conduct themselves, how entitled they are, and how they don't seem at all to really understand the things that they're fighting for. So let me illustrate this with some examples that stood out to me. A few days ago, a video of a press conference with a Columbia University student went viral. In the video, she is asked by a reporter about her demands that the university feed protesters who are occupying a place called Hamilton Hall. The woman refers to food and drink being brought to the students as humanitarian aid and suggests that students will starve to death if they are not fed.
Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
I love it how she even stops herself to be like, well, I know we're on an Ivy League campus. These people are just the gift that keeps on giving. The reporter responds to this, saying that the students put themselves in this position and basically want to role play as revolutionaries while simultaneously expecting to be brought food. And that obviously didn't go down so well.
Nobody's asking them to bring anything. We're asking them to not violently stop us from bringing in basic humanitarian aid.
They're stopping the delivery of food?
We are looking for a commitment from them that they will not stop it violently.
But they haven't stopped it yet.
I don't know to what extent it has been attempted, but we're looking for a commitment.
Dude, these people are so dramatic. You think your university is going to violently stop you from feeding yourselves? Stop it! Like, what am I even listening to here? Your parents' cousins? Well, I suppose that would make sense, actually, given the ideology these people are defending. Before you yell at me in the comments for being a big meanie, what I'm suggesting here is statistically accurate, so do with that what you will. Similarly, an Associated University of Chicago Instagram account, which I believe is run by protesting students, posted stories asking for particular items so that they can better protest. This included things like Plan B, HIV tests, and dental dams, COVID tests, and portable chargers. Is the assumption here that at this encampment protest there are going to be people who are doing the bumpity bump? The devil's tango? The horizontal monster mash? Well, I suppose that's one thing to do when you're unemployed and protesting at your university. At least here we can brush some of these things off as funny. Entitled, but funny. You know, we can do a little bit of mucking. But then we roll around to the huge amount of disrespect. A few days earlier, a clip took off that showed students at Harvard University replacing the American flag with the Palestinian flag, because of course they did. This also happened at George Washington University and the University of Chicago. These students also gleefully cheered as these flags were raised at each of these locations. There are also photos floating around that show a statue of George Washington at George Washington University covered in the same flag, a headscarf, and Free Palestine stickers, and also a ton of graffiti. I don't know what these people have against the statues. Why is it always the statues? More footage has shown the state of these campuses, with protesters at UCLA completely destroying the outside of a building called Royce Hall, covering the walls and floor in graffiti, barricading the entrances, and strapping tents to the building. Which, I don't know, maybe this is a little impressive. How have they done this? I don't know about the rest of you, and there's obviously a bunch of reasons why this makes me mad, but I think I react in part so viscerally because so few modern buildings actually even look nice. And these straw-brained people are just out here destroying the aged ones. The nice-looking aged ones. There's just no excuse for this, as far as I'm concerned, especially now that we have buildings that look like this.
Excuse me, I need your help. You need to kill me.
In yet another video, again on the UCLA campus, pro-Palestine protesters had left behind an enormous amount of rubbish after their encampment had ended. Although police stepped in to dismantle the camp, many of the students who were there protesting likely consider themselves environmental activists, and this is how much rubbish they leave behind. And before anyone is like, oh no, they didn't have time to clean up. I'm sorry, but no. You have to make an effort to not care to leave an area looking like this. But jokes aside, I would argue that almost all of their concern for the environment when actually put into practice is entirely performative. And speaking of performative, please enjoy my favorite video to come out of all of this, which shows a bunch of activists running at police holding shields made out of rubbish bins. Yeah. Every time I watch this, I can't help but feel so sorry for these men. Like, yes, they are LARPing, they are live action role playing as like tough people, but I think it just shows that they yearn for the mines. There's one part of this video that I unfortunately can't include, but it's basically where one of the rubbish bin shield guys runs directly into one of the police officers, and he's probably hoping that some of that masculinity is gonna transfer onto him. Probably the first time in his life that he's ever done something physical.
I'm not a baby, I'm a man!
I think the last video that I would like to show you is of a group of pro-Palestine protesters praying as the sun sets on the UCLA campus. The women are situated in the back behind all the men, and to cap it off, they're wearing hijabs. Hilariously or depressingly, depending on your take, you just know that these women are gender studies liberal feminists who use words like microaggression and mansplain and rail against any sort of perceived slight against them by men, but will voluntarily cover their heads and sit behind men. I wonder where all of the non-binary they-thems prayed. You also know that these are the same liberal feminists who will protest and fight for the inclusion of transgender people in women's spaces, while also fighting for the rights of an ideology and religion that is intolerant of them and the LGBT community they so uphold. I can't stand any of it. The mental gymnastics, while impressive, pain me. As a bit of an aside, what's worse is that the women who grew up in Islamic countries are piping up to say that the unholy alliance between Islamists and radical liberal women is extremely upsetting, and honestly, I completely agree with this, but that's obviously a video for another day. But here's the thing, right? When considering this group of people, the overt disrespect, the entitlement, and the cognitive dissonance is a feature, not a bug. They harp on about environmentalism, but put effort into being disgusting pig people when it counts. And I don't want to hear the excuses about the effort it takes to clean up after yourself. When you contrast this with, say, this video of Japanese people volunteering to clean up a stadium after a sports match, going through with their little rubbish bags, it's so cute, you learn how little these people actually care. The same goes for these liberal feminists who scream from the rooftops about intersectional feminism, uplifting women, fighting for women's rights, but when it comes down to it, they will embrace an ideology that subjugates women all over the planet. This also speaks to the Queers for Palestine thing that we've seen all over the place. This too is madness to me, given that these people will actively embrace a belief system that actively hates them abroad, but will condemn anyone who thinks even the slightest bit differently than they do on their home soil. I am too grumpy and old for this, I fear. When I make my videos, I try to be as even as I can, so I include different viewpoints, the good with the bad, all sorts of things that try to give a more rounded out picture of a situation. But here, and I freely admit this, I kind of don't really have a ton of nuance when it comes to this issue because it's pretty black and white for me. And I realize that that means that people will disagree with me, but that's perfectly okay. I view most of these kind of protests as performative and shallow and quite honestly pretty naive. Some more conspiracy-minded might even say orchestrated and coordinated. I don't know. Who would even suggest that? There is perhaps nobody more privileged, and I shudder to use that word, than Ivy League university students in the United States. These are young people who, I would imagine, probably have never really experienced real life. They don't quite grasp world events or history, and don't really have a good understanding of what's going on politically around the globe. And one of my biggest issues with them comes from the fact that basically every single initiative that they get behind is almost always the wrong one. And that's not to say that protesting war in and of itself is a bad initiative. It's not. And in fact, Americans have a long history of expressing their anger when America involves itself in foreign conflicts. But if this was about war, which it isn't, then one could reasonably assume that these children would also be upset by America's involvement in Ukraine. But they aren't. There are also so many important things that these young people and students could be standing up for that directly impact them, their families, and everyday Americans. The cost of food, cost of goods, Congress being full of geriatrics, the predatory health insurance system. Pick a cause, there's a lot to choose from. But instead, they concern themselves with things that really have no way of ever touching them, and they make their determination of who they support based on victimhood status and how brown someone is. This is just like another version of BLM, to be completely honest with you, from a group of young people who are so bored and entitled that they have nothing but outrage culture to sustain them. And look, as an aside, if you think I'm attacking these kids, it's not entirely their fault. They have been brainwashed by commie totalitarian professors since the very moment they stepped foot into university. And really, that's just a reflection of the state of America's education system. It really is ideological subjugation. Obviously, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there is so much to say and see when it comes to this topic, but I've had to leave a ton of things out and a ton of my opinions out just due to the fact that we would be here for a very long time. But ultimately, I am sick and tired of the entitlement and insanity that spawns from university campuses. I am tired of these people, I am tired of their actions, and I am tired of the causes that they get behind. But on one positive note, I am really heartened to see the other students who have decided to push back and fight back. That gives me a little bit of hope. But in the end, and I think this is fair to say, American universities right now are merely reaping what they've sowed, and they're getting out what they put into the very students who are turning on them. They have created a rod for their own back, and if these students weren't doing things that were so wantonly destructive and terrible, it would be a little bit cathartic. Now, I open the floor to all of you. What do you all think? Are you on my side of this issue where you think that these young people are incredibly disrespectful and entitled and you're just sick and tired of watching people behave like this? Do you think that they should be doing this, that this is the way to achieve their ends and the cause that they're standing up for is a good one? Do you think that the destruction of property is necessary, unnecessary? What do you think about the police getting involved and arresting people? And what do you generally make of this issue overall? As always, if you have made it this far in the video, congratulations. I always like having you guys along for the full ride. If you are not subscribed already and you would like to see more of this and more of me, please subscribe to the channel and feel free to leave a like and a comment on this video, as I do read the majority of them and I really like hearing your feedback. Of course, let me know if you have any video ideas or suggestions, and I will see you wonderful people in the next video.